Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be reviewing Dandy and Randy DX on the Nintendo Switch. Now this game is a retro-styled top-down adventure game, and it was released on April 29th of 2022. It currently sells for only $6.99 on the Nintendo Switch eShop. The game itself is published by Radalaika Games, and it has a download size of only 195 megabytes. Now, our question for us today is this game an awesome little retro throwback, or rather just a game that should be avoided? Well, we're going to figure that out in today's review. Remember, if you are liking the content, consider hitting that like button. If we start with the storyline, I'll be honest, there isn't much here beyond the initial setup. But basically, Dandy and Randy are broke. Mysteriously, someone sends them a flyer letting them know that if they find the long-lost Celestial Stone, they will be promised fame and riches. So seeing this as the best way to get out of their current predicament, they jump in their biplane and they set off to find the stone. Now yet again, this is a game that other than a few very short dialogue sequences, you won't really get any storyline till a slight twist ending. Yet again, however, this is a game centered around gameplay and not necessarily storyline, so it's perfectly fine and it fits with the overall design. Now, if we jump straight into the gameplay. Now, when I say that this game is retro-styled, it is heavily retro-styled. I mean, playing this game, I felt like it was almost a long-lost NES title. And just in perfect retro style, they drop you into the game and give you absolutely no instructions. Everything is about exploring and figuring out what you need to do. Now to sum it up, without any spoilers, what you need to do is make your way through each zone and beat the boss. To get to the boss, you're going to find each one of the 4 hidden keys in each area. Some keys will be out in the open and you'll discover through exploration, other will be by defeating enemies, and lastly, some by solving simple puzzles. As you make your way through the different areas, you'll also be discovering new items to unlock abilities. Now, in between finding the different keys, you'll also generally have a hidden item per area which you'll need to progress. Example of these will be a boomerang to hit a far-off switch or a hammer to smash rocks. Now, this overall progression system does give it a very slight Metroidvania type appeal. However, revisiting old areas is never required, so I wouldn't exactly call this a Metroidvania. Now, this pretty much sums up the whole gameplay loop. Repeat this in each one of the zones, and you pretty much will make your way throughout the whole game. Now, obviously, puzzles will get more complex as you move your way through the game, since they can depend on multiple abilities. However, what I really did enjoy is there's no hand-holding here. Everything is based on observation. If you're used to these retro-style puzzlers, it'll probably be pretty straightforward and easy. However, if you're not used to these retro puzzlers, a couple of these might leave you scratching your head. Now, there is a hidden shop throughout each level. However, the upgrades here are very simple. Either refill your health, buy a potion that will automatically refill it after death, or number 3, increase your heart meter by 1. Now, dying in the game has very little consequence. With unlimited lives and continues, all it does is cut your current money in half. However, if you make it back to where you died, you can recover that lost money. Lastly, there are a couple of extra characters that you can actually unlock throughout the gameplay that are hidden in a couple of the zones. Now, I do want to mention that although there are multiple playable characters, there's actually no difference between any of them beyond their appearance. Now, the game actually does also offer 2-player local co-op. However, in my personal experience, it actually made the game harder, not easier. But nonetheless, it is available and it is there. So you know what? So far, although simple, it's set up a pretty satisfying gameplay loop. Now that brings us, however, to my biggest issue with the game. I managed to finish it in 1 hour and 15 minutes, including finding both hidden characters. However, everything up until the ending, I was having tons of fun with, and it was very satisfying. But do keep that in mind as we keep moving through the review, because the biggest issue with this game that I had was it was just too darn short. Now if we move on to the controls in the game. So first of all, this is not going to be a huge section because the controls here are very simple. You move around either using the D-pad or your left joystick. The A button is going to be your go-to button for most interactions with the environment. Some objects can be picked up and thrown, which is your main way of dispatching enemies and bosses. You can also use your currently equipped item using the X button. Obviously, the uses of these different items will vary based on which one you have equipped at the moment. To cycle between your different equipped items, you use the top bumpers, the L and R button. And to be honest, that pretty much sums up all the controls you need to know to get through this game. One last thing to note is that there are also items that can be interacted with simply by pushing them. And overall, this perfectly delivered on making this feel like an old school 2-button game. Just with the added benefit of being able to cycle through your items with the L and R buttons rather than having to go into a sub-menu. Responsiveness in the controls is spot on. I had no problems with any of the controls throughout the whole gameplay process. So as I said earlier, not much more to say here. Let's move on. Now we're going to take a look at the graphics and sound. First of all, they aimed at having a retro pixel art style, and on that point, they delivered perfectly, using nice, vibrant colors. And although simple designs, everything looks like it should and does have an overall warmth to it. Would I have maybe enjoyed them to find a way to put a little bit more expressiveness into the sprites? Perhaps, but at the same time, you can't blame them too much since they were going for an extremely retro presentation. What I would like to have seen, however, is a few more cutscenes, because the initial cutscene you get is some really beautiful pixel artwork. And unfortunately, without any spoilers, you don't really see any other cutscenes till your ending one. I do think that one or two other little cutscenes with a little bit of added storyline could have put a really extra touch of flavor to the game. But overall, although simple, I am satisfied with the overall visual presentation of the game. Now we move on to sound. And it's odd to say for a game like this, but this is the best part of this game. Maybe not so much the sound effects, but the soundtrack to this game is amazing. I mean, it's good enough that this would be a chiptune soundtrack that I would listen to even when I'm not currently gaming. I would even go so far as to say that at certain points, the soundtrack even completely outshines the rest of the game. Now, I'm not saying that as a negative point, it was just quite striking how great it was. So from an auditory standpoint, especially if you're playing with headphones, this is an overall great experience. Now we move on to the verdict. And if this is the first time you're watching one of my reviews, my full review scale is down below in the description of the video. As we get into the scoring, I want to say this game was very hard for me to score. And overall, I'm going to be giving it a 6.5. Putting it at the high end of a decent game. Now, on the one side, I had a very solid and satisfying gameplay loop, a pretty solid visual package, and a completely amazing soundtrack. And on the other hand, I have a game that can probably be easily finished in under an hour and a half for a first playthrough. And added to that, it probably takes about a half hour of gameplay before things start getting complex enough where they feel satisfying. Now, this is really the story of a game that ends up ending just when things start getting really good. And that's overall how I get to a 6.5, because even though they ended up aiming at a budget price point of only $7, there are still other games out there that will deliver a very satisfying experience, but a much longer one at the same price. One thing, however, that I will point out, if this game goes on sale, especially close to that $2 price point, if you want an extremely short yet sweet game at $2, this would feel amazing. So now I want to hear from all of you. Have you played Dandy and Randy DX? Do you agree with my findings in this review? Let me know in the comments down below. And as usual, don't forget on the way out, if you did appreciate the review, consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel if you aren't already, and clicking the notification bell so you know when all my future videos come out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.